Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
You've discovered your link to GoPowerCat.com's PowerCat podcast. Now, here's your host, GoPowerCat.com publisher, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the PowerCat Insiders podcast. We've shuffled the lineup a little bit today. We're going to try something new here as Kansas State is coming off a really disappointing 68-61 loss to Texas A&M, a game in which they were mostly competitive until the final stretch with some turnovers really got to the Cats. They shot 35 three-pointers, and of course Nigel Pack was really, really good in the game. K-State is now 5-13 overall, and coming out of the Baylor game last Wednesday, and we'll talk about that briefly. We don't want to recount too much about a loss that was 107-59. K-State's now 1-8 in the Big 12 as they head to Kansas on Tuesday for the first edition this season of the Sunflower Showdown. And they'll get KU back here in Manhattan in short time as they are getting into a really, really tough stretch of basketball. We're joined today by Matt Walters and Jay Heydrich, our usual pair, and also joining us is former Missouri basketball player. He was at Missouri from 2008 to 12. He's now a Kansas City-based scout for the New Orleans Pelicans of the NBA. Jarrett Sutton is on the podcast with us today. And as always, we are sponsored by Blue Mark Energy. Does your company or your employer spend $4,000 or more a year on energy bills? Would you like to reduce those costs by 25% or more and maintain the same level of service and reliability? If so, it's time to speak with Blue Mark Energy. Blue Mark Energy, K-State owned and K-State proud. Matt, let's start with you. Kansas State loses to Texas A&M 68-61. The score doesn't really reflect the game. I mean, it was a close game for most of it, and it just got away from K-State at the end, a dreadful ending for the Wildcats. It was almost like, Matt, they haven't been in a close game for a long time. Your thoughts overall on how K-State played, and of course Nigel Pack was just fabulous in this game.
Well, first you feel for Dejuan Gordon going out, but I'm just going to go with what you said, and that's the value of Nigel Pack to this basketball team and how K-State tried to operate without him. You know, we said for weeks and weeks, about Nigel's importance and, Davion Bradford and those two in particular, but things were much more settled. Yeah, he hits a boatload of threes. He plays almost 38 minutes, has 5 assists. Jay and Jarrett may say something else, and you may as well, Fitz. I know Bruce talks about it. I pay zero attention to the plus-minus chart. I pay no attention to it. It means nothing to me. It's not a stat I use on the air. But I'm going with what I saw with my eyes and heard with my ears, and that's Nigel Pack. And, unfortunately, he missed some time. I don't know that, you hope a player doesn't regress, but, I like that kid. He's calm, he's cool, he's collected. You don't see unnecessary emotion from him. He's going to be K-State's floor leader, and he's also going to be a guy that is going to score. I'm not going to call him Jacob Pullen. I'm not going that route, but he's going to be a guy down the road that puts the ball in the hole for K-State. We talked earlier. He's a guy that wants to take those shots when it matters.
A really, really impressive line for Nigel Pack, the freshman point guard. 37 minutes, 36 seconds, pretty incredible coming off of COVID, just game number 2 for him. So he's kept himself in pretty good shape, so that's a good sign. 9 of 16 from the field, more remarkably, 8 of 14 from three-point range. He had 3 rebounds, 3 steals, 5 assists, and if you want to have a negative in there, he had 3 turnovers, but that just kind of went with the day for K-State is crucial turnovers. They actually only had 11 in this game, Jay Heydrich, and yet some of those were late and really crucial possessions for the Wildcats. Just finding another way to lose, unfortunately, for the Wildcats.
Yeah, that just comes with being young, trying to build a winning culture. You got to figure out a way to get through some of those difficult times. And as good as Nigel was, he didn't get a lot of help. A kid like Sultan Miguel with his athleticism to have the line that he had, they got to get more out of guys like that. Sultan Miguel should be able to get to the rim, should be able to get to the line, should be able to do some of the things that a player with his caliber of athleticism should be able to do, and they're not getting it. I think it's pretty clear that Nigel Pack's going to drive this team, does drive this team, and he creates for so many. But K-State, it's like a broken record, right? I mean, Nigel was phenomenal from the three-point line. The rest of the team was 2 for 21 if you take from the three-point line. If you take Nigel out of that, and on a 2 for 21 stat line for this team, I'm not sure that the number on the right side of the dash isn't worse than the one on the left. The fact that they took 21 threes as opposed to only made 2, so they've got to just get away from that. And it's been the story all year. And until they do, they're going to find themselves struggling like they have.
Jarrett, let's bring you into the discussion. We were talking before we started recording, and you get to drive to games that are close. You haven't gone to K-State because, bluntly, there's nobody for a scout to look at right now. I mean, that's obvious to any fan. However, you know this program, and you're watching from kind of an arm's length now. What are your impressions of a K-State program that has had some really good points in history, and this certainly is not one of them?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start the conversation. This is a tough year for K-State. The fact that they're on this losing streak in Big 12 play, and they're trying to find an identity. They don't necessarily have an alpha dog, obviously, and you think back at some great players in K-State history. I know, Barry Brown being one that jumps out most recently, a guy that could really take over games, had an ability to score, play both ends of the floor. Hopefully Nigel Pack can be that long term. They got a lot of young guys that are developing and being asked a lot of, and it's good to see Nigel break through. And again, there's a whole other month to this season, so you'd like to see K-State be competitive, right? You'd like to see them just be in games like they were on Saturday. That's a good sign, and close the year strong. The biggest thing, I think, when you look at the team moving forward is player development, identifying your personnel, what guys really are going to be a part of this program long term. They're not getting a lot from their sophomores that I thought would maybe take a step forward. They haven't had a big jump. So I think that's part of it too. And I mean, you look at the success of Coach Weber at K-State. I mean, it's really based off of having experience, having guys in positions as juniors and seniors to carry and lead the team. And I think you look at where this team sits ranking, offensive and defensive rating. We just talked about plus minus. I agree. I look at plus minus. It doesn't tell the whole story at all. I kind of glance at it. It's not something I take solely, as number one priority, but defensive efficiency, defensive rating, offensive as well, I do. And when Kansas State's at the bottom of both of those in the Big 12, that's tough to overcome, because typically when you look at K-State, the way I view K-State with Bruce Weber is they might struggle on offense. It might look painful offensively, but defensively, they're going to get stops, and they're going to be in games because they'll defend, they'll guard, they'll rebound. I think this team's done a good job hitting the defensive glass. That's probably in one area they've been good in, is rebounding the ball in the defensive end. But, finding that level of consistency night in and night out on both ends of the floor just hasn't been there. And that's something that I think, is probably frustrating for this coaching staff, is they're just not getting it on either end of the floor. They've had turnover problems. It was good to see them take care of the ball the other day. But there's just a lot of growing pains, and it's a sign of a young basketball team. It wasn't that long ago this team was in the NCAA tournament, making a run at an Elite Eight. I mean, they've had a lot of success. And so that is in the back of my mind, is that this is just a really tough year, a lot of growing pains, a lot of young players trying to figure themselves out on the floor. And that's some of that is personal. It's not all on Bruce. Some of that is personal as well. It's big time college basketball. And when you struggle and teams know your tendencies and they know what your skills are, and you don't have a lot of skill development there, you're going to struggle. And it seems like that's been a big problem.
Jarrett brought up those sophomores, Matt. And, of course, Montavious Murphy's lost for the season with another knee injury. Dejuan Gordon played 4 minutes in this contest before turning an ankle or something. It is not broken, Bruce Weber clarified on Monday, but it is a severe ankle injury that will keep him out for a period of time, but it sounds like they'll get him back. Antonio Gordon just continues to mystify me, Matt. I mean, he can look so bad and so good within the confines of a matter of possessions, but he did have a really crucial flurry in that first half. He ended playing 19 minutes, 3 of 6 from the field, 5 rebounds, 8 points, and an assist. Crucial flurry in that first half to keep K-State in the game, and I thought that was really good because Antonio is really inconsistent, but he does fill a gap for K-State as a taller guy at the 4 spot if they want to be a little bit bigger.
He didn't like to play the 4. He's one of those guys that wants to live out behind the half moon. And I'm not running away or going away from your question, Fitz, but you used the word there, and Bruce used it in postgame, and that is inconsistency. Yeah, he had some good minutes against Texas A&M, but you have to learn to do it on a daily basis, and I'm not talking about just games. And it's obvious to me that he doesn't do it on a daily basis quite yet in terms of practice and those other things. And I'm going back to what Jay said and Jarrett said some good things. I can't think of another reference, but it's Groundhog Day. When we do this show on Mondays, it's like Groundhog Day because Kansas State is taking way too many threes, and Jay hit it spot on. There's no way that Kansas State, on a game-in, game-out basis, should be taking more than 20. They took 35 against A&M. And you have to know who you are. You have to be comfortable in your skin. You have to be able to be coached. You have to listen. And there are times where I just think guys are doing too much on their own. And K-State hasn't been a great offensive team for a couple years now, and not even when Dean and Barry and Kamau were running the ship was K-State great offensively, but they did enough and executed and did things that they were supposed to do. And it's to me right now, it's a potpourri. You never know what you're going to see or smell with this team, and we know they're young, we know they're inexperienced, and it's going to continue, but they have to be coachable. And for me, I said it at the beginning of the year, wins and losses to me this year don't matter. And yeah, I may be crazy, but wins and losses don't matter. And now that you're at this point, the last month, K-State's got to get better. There have to be signs of improvement. Be competitive, as was stated. Don't get beat by 35. Don't get beat by 45. Don't get beat by 25 for that matter. And just look like a basketball team that cares. I think this team cares, but they've got to compete like crazy now in the final month because Bruce Weber's going to be back next year. I don't think there's any doubt that Bruce Weber's going to be back next year. Next year's going to be a lot different in terms of, you can talk about the hot seat, you can talk about all that other stuff, and it's going to be really amped up come next year, assuming he's back as head coach, because this team has got to show signs of progress, and it needs to start right now.
Jay, Matt led us right into it. The talk of Bruce Weber being back or not being back. I think if you judge on social media, he won't be back. He can't be back. That can't just happen. And yet it sure does sound like Athletics Director Gene Taylor wants him back. And I know that fans have been really frustrated, and this is such a weird year. I mean, it just is. There's no way around that when you got a new team and have to, have so few gatherings where your whole team is available for practice or enough guys are available for practice and try to teach defense and those things. But it was that 48-point loss at Baylor that broke a lot of fans as well. You're going to lose at Baylor with this team. There's no way around that. You're not good enough to compete with Baylor, home, road, anywhere right now. And Baylor just doesn't let hardly anyone compete with them. But to lose by 48 points, to break a record that was set for largest margin of defeat in school history, that was still around from 1934, for God's sakes. To exceed that record is just astonishing and was just a bridge too far for fans in terms of all the losses, and now the beatings are so severe. Without COVID, maybe K-State loses that game by 30, but that's still a huge margin of defeat.
Yeah. Baylor's one of the best college basketball teams I've seen in my lifetime this year.
Yeah.
I mean, they are phenomenal. Top to bottom, they're athletic. They have great guards. They can do it all. And Bruce made the comment after the A&M game that Tom Izzo called him and said that, not even God himself could have beaten Baylor the other night. And maybe not, but I think God could have kept it within 20, and wouldn't have lost by 48. So, it's something. And those types of comments, I know what Bruce is getting at, but those don't help him at this point, where you just got done with A&M and we're still talking about Baylor. We're still trying to justify what happened to Baylor. I think that from a lot of K-State fans' perspective, it's just deflection. It's, trying to, instead of addressing the issue that we have at hand, it's always talking about why we can't do something instead of just going out and doing it. And to Matt's point, I think that's the frustration that a lot of fans have right now, is that it is a broken record. It's the same thing week after week, and it is a young team. And when you have a young team, you're going to struggle. But for me personally, what I struggle with is that we're still seeing the same mistakes in February now that we saw in November. The same things that led to Fort Hays State beating us in the non-con are the same things that are leading to Baylor beating us by 48. And that's, lack of execution on offense. That's not getting back on defense. That's just not playing hard consistently. And against Fort Hays State, that results in a 13-point loss. Against Baylor, that results in a 48-point loss. And those things just they transition just in different magnitudes against the team you're playing, but they still transition from week to week. And so that's the biggest frustrating thing for me, is that the one thing that these freshmen are getting plenty of is playing time. And yes, it's hard to watch freshmen grow on national TV, but in front of your eyes, they're not getting beat up in practice and learning in practice. We're seeing that growth process in front of our eyes every week, and it's frustrating. But as hard as the process has been, we should still see the growth. I don't think that we're seeing the growth that at least I would personally anticipate across the board. There's been some really bright spots. Don't get me wrong. There are some positives here, but for the most part, we're seeing a lot of the problems that we saw in November.
Hey, Fitzy, quick question, if I may. Forget Fort Hays for just a second. Jay was pretty young. Jarrett's pretty young. But I want to pose this question. Again, leave Fort Hays to the side. Worst loss, what happened at UMKC years ago, or the Baylor loss?
I think that UMKC.
It ain't even close.
Yeah.
That UMKC loss was maybe the worst in history. To me, you can't even compare the two. But so I was just curious when Jay was answering, it just made me think that night, because I remember when we were at the bowl game the night before K-State's playing Ohio State, and you want to talk about just sucking the air out of one of the biggest cities in the country and a fan base. That loss was infinitely worse than K-State getting housed at Baylor last week when the bus broke down. They couldn't even get Uber to get the guys to the stadium or the arena.
The difference for me between the UMKC and Baylor game was the fact that we were at a bowl game and I was able to have a drink with you after finding the score out. Well,
we needed a dump truck full of it that night.
Jarrett, we've got you on here to be the outside voice of I'm not going to put reason on your shoulders, but of evaluation here. Bruce Weber, his time at Kansas State has been such an enigma. This is season number 9. He's got 2 Big 12 championships and a third season when he went to the Elite 8. The other 6 seasons, far less productive, including these last 2, which will be the back-to-back the worst 2 seasons in K-State basketball history. Last season being the most losses in a season. But those championships do stick out. Because for all the fans want to say about Bob Huggins, Frank Martin, their tag team time, they didn't do that. They didn't win a title. In fact, you got to go back to Jack Hartman to find the last title, and that's a long time ago. So as an outsider, how do you evaluate the state of Kansas State basketball in 2021?
I would evaluate it as, first of all, I'm going to take Matt's comment about potpourri. I'm going to save that one and use that down the road too. So that was good. When I evaluate this team, let's take Baylor, for example. You know, I know K-State fans want to talk about that. We're talking about it right now. That Baylor team has developed. They had Jared Butler coming back. I didn't know if Jared Butler was going to even go back to Baylor. He was one of the last players to make a decision on if he was going to declare for the draft or go back to Baylor. Davion Mitchell has improved significantly as a point guard, passing, shooting the ball. He's always been a great defender. Masio Teague was a big-time scorer before he got to Baylor. Masio has embraced his role. He's been so much better this year because he's not trying to be someone he's not, and he's learning to play alongside Jared and Davion. And what I'm trying to get at is that took time, and it also took the coaching staff making changes. And I know you guys probably are aware of this, Jay. I think we've talked about this in the past, but what Baylor's done and Scott Drew has done is really address how they recruit and what players they're looking at and going after. Yes, it's good to go after the 4- and 5-star guys. It's great to get talent. You have to have talent to win in college basketball. You also have to have guys that want to work and want to improve and love the game and, you know, are fearless. Let's face it, guys that are tough and gritty. And that to me is what Davion Mitchell and Jared Butler are. When I think of K-State too, I think of like the Xavier Sneed, Dean Wade, Barry Brown team. You know, those three guys really embraced their roles really well. I know Dean went through injury issues, but those guys shot the ball from three. They were really unselfish. They were team guys. They were K-State guys. They were great culture guys. They played hard. They played through injuries. They were tough and gritty defensively. They found ways to win in multiple ways. When I look at this K-State team right now, they got two guys that shoot over 30% from three. One of those guys will be returning next year in Nigel. They have to develop their roster that they have now, and there has to be growth there. And that has to come from players wanting to work, wanting to improve their skill development, take steps forward. Or it's got to be the coaching staff also looking at this and saying, look, we've had 2 down years. Guys that we're really dependent on aren't living up to the standard that we are really wanting here at K-State. How do we change this? Do we go hit the transfer portal? Do we start looking for guys that can come in and maybe be a 35 to 38% three-point shooter that can be a 3-and-D type of weapon that can come right in and play off a waiver? Like, there's different ways to build your personnel nowadays that I think might be something to look into as well. So I think it's the coaching staff identifying where the program is at, what guys are in that locker room, what guys want to be there in Manhattan, what guys want to put in the time, want to work. And I think that Baylor loss, look, those guards got to see what it's like to play Baylor, what it's like to see a team that is an elite college basketball team that's really good off the dribble, that can create, that pass it well, that shoot it well. They're a great team, and everybody fulfills a role, and they all play relentlessly hard. They're tough. They're never satisfied. And to me, that's got to be these young players' mentality. It's just, I would show that game on film down the road. Just pull that game back up and say, look, this is where we were. Is this the team you want to be? Is this the team you want to show? Because everybody's seeing that. The film doesn't lie. So it's a long-winded answer to say, I think it's the coaching staff and players all looking themselves in the mirror and making decisions on, look, do we believe in these guys? Do these guys want to be here, work, and can we build around these guys the right way? Because obviously they got to make some significant jump next year. And like we've said, they got to play better in February. I mean, they got to play competitive. They got to find ways to show some growth so they can build on that.
And I want to follow up on that one thing real quick, Fitz, because that's a great point. I think Jarrett's comments are especially magnified. We talked about this a lot on this podcast, that they don't have any seniors. There's no upperclassmen for these guys to rely on to teach them that, you know, it's middle of February and you can't feel your legs when you're walking upstairs. You know, Jarrett remembers those time periods. This is the hardest time period there is in college basketball, coming right off Christmas. I mean, it sucks, especially if you're not winning. And I think the fact that you have a lack of upperclassmen here puts it even more so on the staff to teach these kids and to force them. I'm a firm believer that a staff develops a player by forcing them to do what they need to do, not necessarily what they want to do. And what I see right now with K-State is that there's a lot of kids who want to shoot threes, who want to sit out and live behind that arc and take bad shots and do that. And somewhere it has to be ingrained in them that you can't do this anymore. And whatever those consequences are, however that comes, but that's up to the staff because of that lack of senior leadership that's just not there. I mean, literally not there. This staff has to focus on forcing these kids to do what they need to do, not necessarily letting them do what they want to do.
And Fitzy, I want to chase that as well. And this is somewhat generic, so forgive me. And I'm glad you've got Jarrett on here because I like seeing and getting that outside perspective a little bit because it's what we talk about. We may talk about it in a little different form, but here's where I'm going to what Jay just said. And yeah, I'm the old crabby dude that says, get off my yard. But I'll go back to when Jordan Henriquez was on the squad. Jordan Henriquez is 7 foot tall. Love the kid, love him today. But I remember my mind would explode when I would show up either to do a game or not do a game, and I would watch J.O. shooting 3-pointers. It just irritates the daylights out of me. And here's why. And this is where the old grumpy guy comes in, is because in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've seen the same thing with a different player who stands 6'7", that has absolutely no business shooting a 3-pointer in my mind. I'm not going to say whether it's a male player or a female player. But what Jay just said about what you want to do is different than what you need to do. I go back to J.O. and I look at other post players, and if you're 6'9", 6'10", 6'11", you should never get outside of 15 feet. You should be able to hit 100% of your layups. You should do the mic and drill for 30 minutes every day. You should work on a hook shot. You should work on elbow jumpers. You should be able to shoot 60% from inside of 15 feet. And right now we've got kids that's where traveling basketball I'm so aggravated with traveling basketball because we don't get what Jay just said. It's not what you need to do. It's what you want to do. And I say the heck with that. And that's where, going back to Bruce and his staff, and it's excellent analysis about looking in the mirror, is Sultan Miguel. There is a time and a place to shoot a three. You have to remember that. And for all of these guys, whether we're talking about leadership, there's not many upperclassmen at all. Eziegu's been in the game, but he's new. And Mike McGurl has the whole world on his shoulder. And I feel for that kid because you can't lead a program with one guy, especially when you're losing. But Davion Bradford should never get outside of 10 feet, in my mind. There are guys that should shoot threes and guys that shouldn't shoot threes. You get to the basket, you rebound. And the other thing that Jarrett said and Jay said about Baylor is you tell me in the Big 12 a team that has defended like that in the last decade. Nobody. That is the best defensive team the Big 12 has seen in at least a decade. They are in your face from the time you walk off the bus till it's triple zeros on the clock.
And Matt, just to add to that point, I think when you're asking about like evaluating where the program's at to that point, I want to know how much these players go home and think, I hate losing, right? I mean, how much does it bother you? Yes. Like we went on a 4-game losing streak when I was in college my junior year. It felt like a 15-game losing streak. I mean, it was 4 games where it was like the worst feeling possible. You'd lose, you'd want to fly home and practice right then. Like that, it was just this horrible taste you had in your mouth, especially when you didn't play well and you knew you were better than what you showed. We had an array of guys in our locker room that hated to lose. Like losing bothered them. There's teams I know losing, it doesn't matter. If I have 15 and 10 and we lose, hey, that's fine. It doesn't bother me. It's a winning mentality. And the one thing that the staff has to always keep in mind is, like you said, wins and losses right now I'm not concerned about with K-State. They're a developing, growing team. What I do worry about is guys accepting losing and just thinking that losing is going to be the standard if I shoot well and have a good game. Like Nigel Pack should be mad they lost. He should already be developed. I know it's tough for a freshman, but that's got to be your mentality because that you can build, that you can take with you. Other guys that are just okay getting by and losing doesn't matter to them, That to me is a problem. Those Baylor guys, losing is no thought in their mind. And Jared Butler going back to Baylor, the reason why he went back to Baylor, wanted to win a national championship. That was the only reason he did it. There was some things about like his stock and everything. No, he wanted to come back to Baylor to win, and he wanted to win a national championship. I think that's something to be said when you're that ingrained in your program. And I think this is another point is, Barry Brown, Dean Wade, and some of these guys that had success at K-State, Bruce calling those guys up, having them come in the offseason and talk to the players and understand like what it means to wear Kansas State across your chest. Those are things I think that are sustainable things you can have in your culture since you've had success. You can play off those maybe with your young guys.
This is a tough word in our society today, whether you're talking about sports or just life in general. And Jarrett said it without saying it, and that is accountability. Who's the guy on the roster that's holding everybody? And I'm not talking about a coach. I'm talking about one of the dudes. Who is the guy in the locker room, whether it's in practice, whether it has to do with going to class, or whether it's in the ball games, who's the one dude that holds everybody else accountable? Barry Brown used to do that. Remember, Barry Brown called a couple of practices by himself back in the day. Other guys have done that. Who's that guy on this roster? And to me, that's who Bruce and Chris and Jermaine and Shane, and Shane's brought some things to the table being one of the young guys, but that's the guy K-State's got to go find, in my estimation, whether it's transfer portal or whether it's another freshman. The Landers kid from Wisconsin, I think, is going to be really good. He's got to get bigger, but K-State doesn't have that, among other things. They don't have the dude that demands it 24/7, and hating to lose is the other thing. Jarrett hit that right on the nail. Who gets pissed off and says enough is enough? Who throws a chair in the locker room? Who's going to live it, breathe it, eat it every single day on this roster?
Let's take a little pause here on the PowerCat Insiders podcast. We have a lot more to discuss as Jarrett Sutton joins Matt Walters, Jay Heidrich, and myself, Tim Fitzgerald. And we're sponsored by Blue Mark Energy.
The PowerCat podcast will be right back.
Is your January looking dry? Get some lotion. Get a humidifier. And better yet, get Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. With Drizzly, you can compare prices across local stores to get the best price on a huge selection of drinks perfect for dry January. Every single time. Non-alcoholic wines? Have a look. Ready-made mocktails? Grab a straw and order them up. Beer without the alcohol? Yep, take your pick. You can find all of them here, in the app, in that phone that's in your hand. Could it be any simpler? Nope, not a chance. So shop for great deals on all your dry January beverages or other drinks and get them delivered to your door or blanket fort, maybe. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations. And don't forget to lotion up your elbows. They're looking a little dry.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage, to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify is here to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 15% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. And sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Odyssey Podcast, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Odyssey Podcast now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/Odyssey Podcast.
We now send it back to the PowerCat podcast.
Welcome back to this edition of the PowerCat Insiders Podcast, a lively discussion ongoing between myself, Matt Walters, Jay Heidrich, and Jarrett Sutton, a former Missouri player and a scout for the New Orleans Pelicans, as he's based out of Kansas City and an observer of K-State basketball from afar, but we thought it would be good to have an outside voice to join us to kind of assess where K-State's at right now. We're sponsored by Blue Mark Energy. It's a natural gas products and services provider serving feed yards, hospitals, hotels, manufacturers, and school districts throughout the Midwest. And Blue Mark Energy is a natural gas provider for the Kansas State campuses in Manhattan and Salina. Blue Mark Energy, K-State owned and K-State proud. Right now, with the environment of college athletics, I'm not just going to say college basketball, we're seeing with football too. When the times get tough, when that happened, when Barry Brown was a freshman, and it has to be said that those freshmen, the Brown, Stokes, Wade trio, they still had a culture in that locker room that was somewhat positive. It had to be reinvented, but guys had been in a good culture of a locker room before the whole Marcus Foster thing. And so there was some leadership there that they could learn from, feed off of. Poor Mike McGurl doesn't stand a chance. This is overwhelming, and I feel for the kid as the only substantial returning player. I mean, the only guy who really had played more than one season. But right now in the college athletics culture, when times are tough and you need to dig in and work on your three-pointer, maybe develop your left hand, maybe learn how to score a little bit more around the basket and do some fundamental work and get better, or I could hit the transfer portal and stop losing that way. And that's really what troubles me, and I think is at the end of the day going to be a significant test for this basketball program. How many guys get pissed off and get in the gym and wear purple next year as better basketball players, and how many of these guys say, I can't go through this again. I'm going to go hit the transfer portal and try to find something better. They probably won't. I mean, we know how the portal works. You've got to be pretty special to end up at a Baylor. But that looms large for this program, Jay. The number of guys, you want to invest in these young guys, but if they don't invest back and they hit the door running, maybe that's good. But also, again, you got to be young again. It's always a young team at K-State, seemingly, with the exception of a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a huge risk, but particularly when, you're losing this way, not necessarily losing, but losing in this particular way. I mean, they're just not on a losing streak. I mean, during the streak, Saturday was the only game that they've really been competitive in. And so when you're losing by an average of 15 plus points a game, it's hard. And I feel bad for these kids because they have been put in a situation with little chance of success. They are kids fighting against men in the ring, and they've been thrown in with no help, and they're fine players. I mean, this was my fear coming into the season. They are a talented group. There's a lot of potential with a lot of kids there, but they're not. None of these kids are going to the draft this year, and those are the types of kids that, Kentucky and Duke and those types of schools can win with those types of freshmen. These are talented freshmen, but they're not those types of kids. They need development. They need some mentorship. They need to learn how to play hard, how to do things the right way. And so coming in and saying, we're just going to rely on, 4 freshmen and 2 sophomores, there was no chance for it. And I feel bad that those expectations have been put on those kids. And so it is a huge risk because I'll be interested to see what happens at the end of the year where, because I'm sure those kids are going to be looking at it too and saying, I got the same thing that fans are saying. How much better are we going to be next year? I'm sure they're asking themselves the same question, some mid-major who's competing for a conference title may seem like a heck of a lot better place than going in and getting your teeth kicked in every other night at K-State. And so that's a huge risk, but that goes down to culture, and that's where you have to get in and get kids into buy-in. If you're going to go this youth route and building route, you have to get kids to buy into something bigger than themselves, and that's the foundation of any program. Of getting not only just a program, of any business, of any relationship, of any marriage, friendship, whatever. understanding that whatever you're doing is bigger than you. And that's a hard thing for kids to recognize in today's day and age of basketball and athletics.
Jarrett, as an NBA guy, I see the college game kind of morphing into how you manage your roster a little bit similar to the NBA. And Bruce Weber's talked about this, how good of a job Scott Drew's done with being a general manager, going out and getting into the portal. The portal gives as much as it takes away. You can go find things in the portal and improve your team. And Scott Drew, and he's not the only program in the Big 12 that's done this, has looked to the portal to bring in some experience, to bring in some guys that maybe can play at a higher level than they were playing, and improved his team and his roster and his culture, his locker room, everything about his program. It isn't just that he's developed great freshmen. I mean, those are really good freshmen that became sophomores, juniors, and now Mark Vidal's a senior and the kind of guy you want on your team, no matter what level. Doesn't matter about the numbers. He's just going to get things done for you. How important is the portal right now in college basketball and coaches becoming their own general managers to build a roster by supplementing a guy here and a guy there? Because I feel like K-State could have gone a long ways with 2 senior portal guys on this roster that would have brought something, playing time, experience, leadership to this roster.
Yeah, I think the transfer portal can be a slippery slope. It's one of those things where, yes, the transfer number's up high, and sometimes players are running from their own problems. Every situation's different. With certain kids, transferring, it does make sense, whether it be wanting to get closer to home. They have family. Every kid's situation's different. There's reasons to transfer. There's also reasons why players transfer, and it's just the easy way out of their own problems. They're just running from coaching. They're running from improvement. They think they're, some player that they're just not. They have no self-awareness. And I think that's where the word accountability does come in. You want to have guys in your locker room that know who they are, that are okay being coached and being told what they're not, knowing what they need to improve, also known as constructive criticism, right? Like being able to take that and build on that. I think the comment about like coaches becoming general managers is a really interesting topic, because when I see college coaching staffs now, when I played, it was, you had your head coach, you had your assistants, you had your ops guy, and you had a video guy. I think more and more what you're starting to see now is that scouting route, the director of scouting, someone that's looking at talent, and that's their job. That's their focus, is to identify the right pieces. We just touched on 4-star, 5-star guys. There's certain programs maybe there's guys that you don't want to be going after from a culture standpoint. And this is even a bigger conversation for some blue bloods that have struggled this year with this conversation. I think it's just a one-year thing, but you got to really identify what you're looking for. What do you need in your program? What makes you better? Do you need shooting? Do you need rebounding? Do you need a defensive stopper? Do you need someone that can create off the bounce and that is an unselfish pass first point guard? Like truly identifying what you need, not just seeking talent, but really identifying and honing in on the right pieces. That's, to me, is the thing. And I think coaches have so much on their plate as a head coach in college. You're dealing with a lot of different things. Having people in place that can identify talent, that have a good trust with you of your philosophy and your system and your scheme, finding the right players. That's my job, is to find the right pieces for our culture. That to me is what might be the trend you're talking about. I'd like to see more trends too on the player development on the side of things. And then also just offensive systems. There's a lot of college systems that are a little bit behind the times, and there's reasons for that. But I mean, the 3-point shot is like the great equalizer now, and you have to be able to shoot the ball. You have to be able to score offensively. You have to be able to adjust. You have to put wrinkles into your offense. You can't just be the same offense throughout a year. Like in February, you got to be showing different things offensively. You can't just be the same offensive team from a system standpoint. I mean, you can get by with talent sometimes, but you also got to be showing different things. Like those are deeper discussions that I think coaches and staffs have to go through and identify every year.
Matt, that's a real problem for K-State, because it's hard to add things in February when you still haven't learned the lessons of December and January with this young team. They just haven't had enough time together, whether it was preseason or during the season when they've been short on bodies. It's hard to develop when you never developed your foundation.
Yep, when he can't practice 5-on-5, and maybe this might have been a more apt comment earlier on in our discussion, and then so be it. But going back again to what Jarrett said about assessment, Jarrett, when you played at Mizzou, were you ever the leading scorer?
No.
When you played at Mizzou, did you play the most minutes?
No.
When you came off the bench, were you the 6th man?
No.
Were you the 10th man?
On certain days.
Were you the guy that handed everybody a cup of water when they came to the bench for a 2-minute TV timeout?
I was the one off that bench first, yeah, to bring morale to the group. Yes, that was me.
For how many years?
4.
You know where I'm going?
Yeah.
3 words. And this is a part of where K-State's going to go. And again, it goes back to Jarrett's astute comment about looking in the mirror. Know your role. And I think everybody from Nigel Pack all the way down the roster, those guys have to be told what their role is and go from there. There are guys that should not be shooting threes. There are guys that should be doing certain things. And to me, that's all part of this recipe now for what's going to happen down the road is know your role. And if guys aren't going to accept that and grow their role, it's not like they're going to be pigeonholed for 4 years or 5 years now. You can grow as a player, but know what you need to bring to the team. Mm-hmm. And that, again, to me, that's part of why we're seeing 35 threes being taken and other issues happening, the same mistakes being made. I'm not saying Bruce Weber doesn't do that, but I can tell you for sure that the 2 previous coaches, Frank Martin and Bob Huggins, knew and told every guy on the bench and that started what your role is, what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do.
And
to me, what's that, Jarrett?
No, go ahead, man. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I think that's got to happen. Whether it's, again, with Nigel Pack, whether it's Selton Miguel, whether it's Casey Eziagu, whether it's Logan Landers, who's coming in next year, you got to know your role. And you have to accept it, and you have to live it every day, and your teammates have to see it. Mm-hmm. It's not just what comes out of your mouth. You have to show up, but you got to know your role.
And it's leadership, I think, and coachability. Like those 2 things, to your point, like roles, absolutely 100% agree. It's true. There's vocal leaders and there's leaders that lead by example. When I think of my Mizzou teams, and I had the great fortune, I was very blessed to be a part of the most wins in Mizzou's school history for 4 years. And we had Kim English, Marcus Denman, 2 guys played 4 years. They were drafted in the same draft, 2nd round. Kim was a vocal leader. He was a great vocal leader. He accepted a role his senior year to play out of position for our team to make us better. It's why we won 30 games. He accepted his role. He wasn't a 4. He knew he had to be a 4 for us. And he was coachable the entire year. Like he listened, he executed everything. He knew not only his position, but everybody else's position. And then we had a guy named Marcus Denman who was an assassin. He was lethal. He was a lead by example every day. He was the toughest player I've ever played with. I played against him in high school, and he was the toughest player I ever played against in high school. I mean, he carried himself with so much swagger, and it wasn't like a vocal anything like that. He just did everything right on and off the court. He put in the time. Like at night, if you were going back to the facility, he was in the gym shooting all the time. So when he had success in games, he didn't get too high or too low. He was consistent with all the things he did from a work ethic standpoint. That's why he was our leader. Like you saw Marcus, he didn't have to tell you. You just saw what he did. You know, I think there's guys I think Jacob Pullen probably is in this conversation back when we played against K-State. Those K-State teams we played against my 4 years were so tough. And Jacob Pullen was relentless. And like when I think about like that piece missing, it's got to be the leadership piece too. And these are young players, but they have to find that role. And then they also have to identify who's your leader, how does that leader lead, and how do they get the most out of other guys? What's their care factor for their teammates? Like, how much do they want to instill in those other guys? Are they happy for other players' success, or are they only happy for their own success? Like, that is always things that you always have to be looking at and identifying, I think, when you're a coach.
Fitzy, right quick, and then I'm done because my battery's going to die, so I apologize. This has been awesome. But what Jarrett said, what I was trying to and did not do a great job of, but Jarrett just got this old grumpy guy's brain going. There's a quote that I'm using in a couple of days during a meeting because it's Super Bowl week from Bum Phillips. Jarrett, do you know who Bum Phillips is or was?
I do not, no.
Okay. Jay Heydrich, do you know who Bum Phillips was?
No, but there's nothing older and grumpier guy than asking younger guys if we know who this person is.
Right.
Bum Phillips said once upon a time, coaching is not about how much you know. Coaching is about what you can get players to do.
I'll back that up just a little bit. I talk to my daughter about leadership all the time. She's 16. She's playing at a high level with her fast pitch softball and kind of going through what the ups and downs of playing against elite level competition is. And I tell her all the time, I say, look, a leader gets people to do things that need to be done without telling them to do it. And Marcus Denman, Kim English, those are two great examples to how that happened. Is people, you see Marcus Denman in the gym at 3 a.m, you're like, I better pick my game up. When you see those people that are sacrificing like that and doing those things, it raises everyone, and that's one thing that this basketball team's got to find is they've got to get things done without being told or forced to do it, and find that accountability.
I got a bolt, but I want to say this before I go. I have never enjoyed listening to a Missouri Tiger talk more than Norm Stewart and John Cadillac until today. And now Jarrett Sutton has vaulted up to near the top of the list. He is now in the top 3, and I hope I get to talk to and hear from him again because that's been great stuff. So, Jarrett Sutton, even though you are a Tony the Tiger, as our friend Robert would say,
yep,
you've at least earned 1 stripe today in my book.
Man, that's elite company. I appreciate it. That means a lot, Matt. It's been good chatting with you as well.
We talk about roles and knowing who you are. And Jay, one of the positives, and boy, I've been searching for him, I'm bringing out of the season is Nigel Pack and Davion Bradford seem to have well-formed games in knowing what they can and can't do. Now, Lord knows Davion Bradford needs to defend better, rebound better, get stronger, all those things that'll come with age. But he was 3 of 3 from the field on Saturday and 7 rebounds. And that's not to say he should have taken more shots. He never had the chance to because his teammates took 35 threes instead of dumping it into the 7-footer who likes to dunk the ball. And Nigel just had a good self-awareness of what he can and can't do. He doesn't try to get too fancy. But a lot of these players on this roster, and we've talked about it all season long. Dejuan Gordon, you're not a three-point shooter. Selton Miguel, maybe you will be someday, but you're not a three-point shooter. Antonio Gordon, you dig it. I don't dig you taking it. On and on. Mike McGurl, bless his heart, has had to do things outside of his skill set, not because he wants to, but I feel like he feels forced to. He's got to try to make the big shot because nobody else is, and it led to him being 2 of 7, which on this day was a good performance from 3 since everyone else on the roster not named McGurl or Pack offered. But, Jay, they just have to learn, and I do lay a lot of this at Bruce's feet. You can't take that shot. I get upset when I see 20 seconds left on the shot clock and Dejuan's chucking up a 3. But I don't see that from Bruce, and that's where I'm getting really frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'd rather. I know he's got limited bench numbers. He's back to full strength now. He's got all of his kids back other than Dejuan, but I'd like to see some accountability again of, if that's what you're going to do, then you're going to sit. And I'd rather lose with someone who's I'm going to lose anyway, probably. I'd rather lose with someone who's going to find that culture that we're wanting to instill. And I think that, let's just call it like it is, the reason why they're still doing it is because they can. And that's really what it comes down to. And what needs to happen is, you talk about Pack and Bradford, there needs to be a sit down and say, these are the two keys to our team. This is what we're going to build around. We need to focus on these. This is how we can have success. If you're tired of losing and getting your tails kicked, this is how we're going to get over that. And then people either buy in or they won't. And I thought Jarrett's analysis of Kim English was great. I venture to say that if Kim English had continued to play the three and tried to be a small forward, he wouldn't have been drafted, because he wouldn't have had the senior year that he had the great senior year, because he created matchup problems for people. And he did what needed to be done, not what he wanted to do. And that led to great success, not only for the team, but for him personally, because he just created nightmares on the matchup side for people. And I think Antonio Gordon can be that type of player. He's not going to overpower you with his size, but he's also not a perimeter player either. But he can create matchup problems. And, you want to, Jarrett's the NBA expert. I'll let it defer to this, but you want to get an NBA scout's attention, average 17 and 8. Regardless of where you get it from or what position you play, they're not going to look at your film unless your stats are first pass the eye test. And then once you do that, then you can get into it. But you're not going to get to those numbers or get any type of attention doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think the versatility and consistency is everything. I think this gets back to a previous conversation we had about just when freshmen arrive on campus. Sometimes it takes time to break them down and get them to really understand, who they are as a player, trying to instill a level of, this is a different level and this is what you got to improve upon. And you got to be able to listen to that, and the messaging's got to be right. I think both Gordons going into the season, Antonio and Devon, is that both those guys, to me, I wanted to see them take a step forward this year. I thought they had some good moments as freshmen, but I think those guys, when you look at them, those are guys that you think you could build around, right? I mean, with Dejon Gordon, he's a good rebounder for a guard. He hasn't shot the ball well. Again, trying to find out his role and his skill. You got to be patient. You got to put your arm around a guy at times. You also got to dig into a guy at some point too. And I'm curious how the practices are going. What are these guys doing in practice? Is it just the light shining brightest and they struggle in games? Does it translate from the practice court to the actual game floor? There's freshmen and young players that struggle with that. They're great in pickup. They're great against a cone in a 1-on-0 drill. That's great. But, when you get into a 5-on-5 game, do you know how to play? Like, do you have a feel? Do you have an IQ? Because this isn't the AAU game anymore. And a lot of players, more times than not everybody, but more times than not, those young players that leave the AAU circuit, go to a big-time Power 5 college basketball team, are asked to play as freshmen. You got to be able to do one thing really well. But a lot of those times, there's a lot of struggles. There's a lot of adversity. A lot of these players think, well, I got to just have the ball in my hand all the time. They don't know how to move without the ball. Like, basic things like that are struggles. And I think, again, sometimes it can sway confidence with guys because they think they're really good, and then they realize, wait a second, I'm not playing well, and this is the first time I haven't played well for an extended period of time, and maybe I'm not getting the touches I got in high school. That's a challenge sometimes for a young player. And that's where I think maybe Bruce is going through that right now, and he's going to figure out something in February where he says, look, I can count on Davion Bradford to do his job. I can count on some of these guys down the road if they're accepting my coaching and practice, and if our plan moving forward is still good and we still are identifying talent to package with these guys long term. This season's not a wash. This season you can still learn a lot of things about guys and where you go with your program.
Jay, Dejuan has said this, that in high school he was the best player in Chicago his senior year, which tells me it was a down year in Chicago, to be real blunt. But his game was inside. He was one of the taller guys on his team, so he played around the basket. He rebounded. He scored. I don't care what he's listed at, a guard, forward, or whatever. That's where his game is. It still is on the inside. And when Dejuan Gordon is focused on rebounding, trying to score 10 feet and in, maybe 15 feet and in, driving, getting to the free throw line, which he doesn't do enough because he's good at it. That's when he excels. But when he decides, it sure is fun to shoot this three-pointer, that's when he struggles, because he's one of those guys that loves to make that shot, but he doesn't remember all the times he missed that shot. Maybe that's good, but boy, I tell you what, not when you're missing as many as he does.
Well, I think it goes down to the old saying that easy can be dangerous, right? And it's just easy for him. That it's easy to take a three-pointer off a pick and roll with 20 seconds left in the shot clock than it is to, give that ball up, cut hard through the middle, come off a screen, come back up, catch it at 15, do a pump fake, go to the rack, get fouled, and have to make 2 free throws. That's hard. That's hard offense, but that's effective offense. And if attacking the rim and getting to the rim, because I guarantee you, he didn't play against a bunch of 5'10" schmucks in Chicago. He played against some competition, but he had success by attacking the rim. And if that was success for him in high school, continue to do what got you what you had success with to get you to this point as well. Don't just abandon it. And that's what he's got to get back to finding that level of success with that.
It's hard it's hard when you are asked to defend and give effort on the defensive end, and those legs are tired, and you're going to the offensive end. You're like, wait a second, I've never been tired to go. It's like, yeah, that's welcome to college basketball, right? I mean, that to me is a big thing for high school players too. And I think Gordon's in the same conversation. Is, look, you got to be asked to do both ends of the floor. Like, if you're going to be a really good player and a complete player, you got to do it on both ends of the floor, and that takes effort and energy and enthusiasm, and it's gonna be a wear and tear thing, and that can affect you offensively. Your legs aren't ready for that because you're not used to being asked to defend at that type of level.
And that's a great point, because these kids, these freshmen, I don't care what AAU team they played for, I don't care how many games they played in the summer, they've never done this before. Their bodies have never been through this. They had no idea what they're getting into. And that makes it difficult. And it's just they're drinking from a fire hose. I tell kids, a girl that played for my father-in-law in Minnesota, she plays in South Dakota and is having just a phenomenal senior year, but she's struggling. She's a freshman and a sophomore as well. And when she was younger and was just in a slump. And I told her, and I would tell every young player this, instead of trying to figure out, I got to be better, I have to do this, go into practice and say, I'm going to be the best person on the floor at this one thing today. I'm going to be the best defender on the floor, or I'm going to set the best screens on the floor, or I'm going to be the best rebounder on the floor. Focus on one thing, block everything else. And what you'll find is if you focus on being just great at one thing in practice every day, or just one thing to be great at a game, everything else will come. Because then it's not, I'm just getting killed and everything. It's, I was really good on defense today. And that confidence builds. And next thing you know, you get you pick off a couple passes, you're getting to the rim, you get a dunk at the other end, and you scored. When you have that attitude of shrinking it down and saying, I'm going to be good at one thing today, I'm not just good, I'm going to be the best on the floor today at one thing, then that success will bleed over to everything else. And I think that just simplifying it would be really good for some of these kids right now.
A sentence that during my brief and uneventful basketball career I never spoke. Boy, I was really good at defense today. Never once at that top of my list. Jared, before I let you go, I got a question I have to ask you. I'm a huge Kim English fan, and not just as a basketball player, but as a person. He is an assistant for Rick Barnes at Tennessee. And if it's this year or next year or whatever year it is down the road, if Kansas State's looking for a new basketball coach, I plan on him being on our, quote, hot board, because I think he has the makings of being an outstanding college basketball coach. You know him. You played with him. You still watch what he's doing. What are your thoughts?
Well, since I've known Kim, I mean, even dating back to when we were freshmen and got on campus at Columbia, he is a basketball savant. He has an incredible basketball pedigree, high IQ, one of the smartest players I've played with. Again, a guy that demanded of himself so much, played hurt, did so many things in our 4 years. I joke with him. I mean, he changed an actual rule in college when we were in the NCAA tournament, the free throw rule that changed when we beat Marquette, and he had to come off the bench and make 2 free throws in a big NCAA tournament game to get us to, at that point, it would have been the Sweet 16. I see what he's doing now too as a coach, and I'm not surprised at how quick, he's bounced around from first Tulsa with Frank Haith and now ending up at Tennessee with Coach Barnes. I've always been a Rick Barnes fan, so even playing against him when me and Kim were in college. And now to see him as an assistant for Coach Barnes and first and foremost, I mean, as a recruiter, he's an NBA draft pick. He can get along with anybody. He's very easy to talk to. He's a guy that does it the right way. And, I think, working for Coach Barnes, I think getting all that experience too, and just really going from a Frank Haith coach team and being an assistant for him and knowing Frank started with Rick Barnes and now Kim's with Coach Barnes, he's been able to learn a lot. And I think he understands what it means to be a head coach. I mean, it's different being a head coach than being an assistant. I know he's itching to be a head coach. I know that's going to be in his future. But I think what he's done as a recruiter, his ability to teach the game, his ability to lean on his experiences too as a player, I think goes a long way in players listening to you and receiving that message. And he's a guy that just relentlessly works hard. He's going to give everything he has to his job. A guy that just is a basketball through and through type of guy who I think is going to be a great head coach one day, whenever that is. His name's been floated around at mid-major schools. He was, a name that was being talked about at UMKC before they hired Billy Donlin. So his name's going to be around every year. But I'm proud of him and just what he's been able to do. He quit playing basketball early to get into coaching. He could have probably played another 5 to 8 years probably if he wanted to, and played overseas, made a lot of money, and he wanted to get into coaching. And I always knew this was going to be his path. I always knew he was going to find a way to get into coaching. He was just too good of a leader, too smart of a basketball mind. And him around the game is good for the game because he's that smart and that bright. I think he's going to have a real prosperous career as a head coach one day.
Very good. Jarrett, we appreciate you joining us today on the podcast. Good stuff. Plus, you have a nice background.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Your Zoom background is much better than Jay Heydrich's. So let's make a list here.
I try to add some color to the Zoom.
Better background, better jump shot, better probably free throw shooter, more minutes. And never mind, Jay.
He did not hand out water better than I did, though. I'll tell you that much for sure.
Yeah, you were good at that.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
That's it for this edition of the PowerCat Insiders podcast. Join us next week when we talk about K-State basketball, maybe some K-State football. Maybe we'll end up talking about the weather. I don't know, whatever the topic will be. We'll talk to you next week.
PowerCat Podcast. All rights reserved. GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street Publishing.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.